All right, Shapiro, I've got two questions for you. One just to get the nerves out, and second one's going to be a bit important. First, do you know a YouTuber by the name of Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske?
No, I don't actually.
He was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I think it would be interesting if you two debated each other.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay, thanks. All right. And then the second one. The second one's a bit critical. Shapiro, you've shown disdain for the people who have called you and a lot of your remarks bigoted. And you make it one of your hallmarks, right? Like, if someone calls you a sexist, racist, bigot, homophobe, you can't take that. You have to, like, fight back like, immediately. Yet, you call these claims against you preposterous, but yet, considering the fact that, A, while you were an editor-at-large at Breitbart, they called people like Bill Kristol a renegade Jew. Also, they...
That was after I left, actually, but...
What did you say?
That was after I left.
Okay. And also, touting...
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
No, it's fine.
Also counting Jewish leaders as neocons, something that you yourself have said is an anti-Semitic slur. Also, when you resigned, you just saw the infamous poster that they put on you. They put like your face into the David Star. Also, you initially defended a video of your own creation, well, not of your own creation.
It was not of my creation, yeah.
The
Columbus Day video, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Daily Wire's, you defended that initially, that video where you defended that as satire, of course, the infamous video of Native American people, their genocide.
Yeah, the video's garbage.
Justified.
Right.
And then finally, and most infamously, you said that Arabs, not Islam, were, quote, your words, were the darkness in the Middle East, were rotten to the core. And most infamously and horribly, you said Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Okay, so can I address those one at a time? Okay, so let's go through them one by one. So, so let's start with the last one, the bomb crap and live in open sewage. Go back and look at the entire Twitter thread. I was specifically talking about the leadership of Hamas. I actually say that in the thread, like in the next tweet. So I don't believe that all Arabs like to live in open sewage and bomb crap, obviously. I think there are millions of Arabs, I actually say in that thread, in that exact same thread, that there are millions of Arabs across the Middle East who are wonderful people, and there are many millions of Muslims who are wonderful people. So, again, that one's out of context. As far as the Columbus Day video, what happened is that I was on vacation, and I got news that this thing had broken. And I looked at it, and it looked to me like a bad video, but a satire video. And I'm always hesitant to pull down satire, just as a general rule, because I think that once you start pulling down satire, then you are opening yourself up to the charge that anything that is intended to be humorous is supposed to be taken at face value. So my initial response was very torn. And over the course of the next 24 hours, the more I looked at it, the more I thought it was garbage, and the more I thought that the comedic value of it was dramatically outweighed by the nastiness of it. And I took the hit myself, and I took it down. Right, so there's that. As far as the column where I talked about darkness in the Middle East, what I specifically was talking about, again, that's taken out of context, is about a column. It was a column with regard to the Palestinian Authority and the fact that if you were to juxtapose Israeli settlements to the Palestinian Authority, then what you would be looking at is a regime that is terroristic and supports terror attacks and supports tyranny and supports the imprisonment of gay people and does not support women's rights. And you're looking on the other side at a regime, at a state that supports all of the same values that we in the West value. So, so I think it's important that we actually give full context to each of those remarks. Again, the reason that I fight back on the racist, homophobe, bigot charge is because if you're going to call me that without evidence, then you're a jackass. And if you're going to take my stuff out... And taking context and I'm not suggesting this is what you're doing. My guess is that you're probably getting this off a list that was provided by some group or another. But if that's the case, then pulling quotes out of context and then using these as bludgeons without actually looking at what I was saying is a cheap trick.
Okay. Just two things I want. First, they weren't meant to use as bludgeons. One of the points that I wanted to make when I came up here was the fact that, it's pretty obvious I'm on the left, is that in terms of the left...
It wasn't obvious to me until you started talking. You see, because I don't assume that just because you're black, you're on the left.
Yeah, pretty brutal. Yeah, I just...
Racist, see. You see how that worked? Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'll be there.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. I want to hear the end of what you were having to say. I don't just want to...
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to... while it may seem confrontational, I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, if you fully explain those to me, then I would. I mean, I wouldn't be out here if I thought you were some intrinsically evil person that...
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do. No, really, I do.
Like,
I'm being serious and not facetious.
Yeah, I would want to discuss. Because I think that, in a large part, you're one of the more important conservative voices there. Like, what I would say is that just often that there's a lot of people in government, our president, who've made questionable choices as regard to saying things about race. And I think,
I do not disagree with you.
Yeah. And I would want that if you, someone who's seen as a rational conservative, if you've made remarks similar to that, then I would want to at least discuss them.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate the opportunity to do that, so thank you.
So my question is about race and culture. So while I agree with you that when you look at white America, it's silly to say that the majority of white Americans are actively trying to prevent you from getting to where you want to be. I'm East Indian, and I have definitely experienced some racism, but I never felt as though it keeps Indians from succeeding. So I do think there's a cultural component that supersedes the color of your skin. But I also think that it's naive to say that it just so happens that the same minority groups that have been historically oppressed happen to have cultures that are less conducive to success. I believe that environment can create culture. Can you acknowledge the historical reasonings that led to these so-called unsuccessful cultures and not put blame on these minority groups? I know that in your heart, I don't think you're a racist person, but in my opinion, to blame people for their failure, for their cultural failures without taking into consideration historical, the history in general, conceals a lack of empathy and sort of hints at racism.
Okay, so I'll fight back on the last point that there's anything to do with empathy or racism here, but I fully agree with you. Like 100, not like 90%, like 100%. I think that bad cultures are generally the result of bad things that have happened in the past or bad modes of thought that have prevailed over time. So, for example, there's a great book by Thomas Sowell called Black Rednecks and White Liberals, and that book essentially suggests that a lot of the pathologies that exist about single motherhood, for example, in the black community, or high rates of violence, are actually outgrowths of a slave and post-slave culture that was imposed by a white society that didn't bother with policing, that didn't care about inculcating morals or virtues in slaves. Obviously, they actually actively fought against it because they didn't want that to happen. And so there was an active fight from against assimilation by white people, and that created an underground culture that's really bad, and that exists in parts of white America, too. It exists in Appalachia. So yes, I think bad cultures have nothing to do with race. I don't think that just because, this is why I'm saying I don't know why it borders on racism to say the cultures are bad. Like, some cultures are bad, some cultures are good, and that has nothing to do with race. Charles Murray wrote an entire book called Coming Apart about pathologies in white communities that are really destructive. So bad cultures do arise very often from historical circumstances, including historical discrimination. What I say is that today, there's nothing preventing an individual from superseding the culture in which you grew up and making good decisions. In a free country, somebody's going to have to break this chain. Somebody's going to have to break this cycle. And so, am I going to? I don't care if you want to say that the pathologies that exist in the black community, black inner city community of high rates of single motherhood and violence, for example, or lack of institutional wealth, that is a result of historic racism. I'm fine with you saying that. I don't have any problem with that. I'm not talking about historical racism when I talk about white privilege. I'm talking about right now the idea that there's a superstructure of rules and laws that are preventing you from succeeding, or a culture that is trying to keep you down. I don't think that's the case. So the question becomes, if you are here, let's say that on average, the culture in white America, or with regard to single motherhood, to take an example, is here, right? Because there's less single motherhood in the white community than the black community. And in the black community, it's here because it's 70% single motherhood rate, and the white community is 40%. Okay, so the question is, before, thanks to racism and thanks to discrimination, there was a cap on the black community that was here, and they couldn't get past it. Okay, now the ceiling's been removed. So what do you as an individual black person do to change your life? And I don't think it's helpful, and in fact I think it's actually quite hurtful, to spend an enormous amount of time talking about the legacy of discrimination and racism instead of talking about what can you do right now to fix your problem. You know, this is a general issue that I have in all of my relationships. When my wife comes to me and she says, there's a problem in my life, before we even have the conversation, I say to her, is this a listening conversation, or is this a you want me to fix it conversation? And I think that when it comes to politics, there should be far fewer listening conversations, like I want you to tell me about all the crap that's happened to you, because I don't care. I mean, I care, but it doesn't. But now the question is, what you going to do? right? That's a much more important conversation because we only have 5 minutes together. Is that 5 minutes going to be spent on all the terrible things that happened, which I fully agree with, that I would have fought if I were there, but I wasn't, right? Are we going to spend 5 minutes talking about all the terrible things that happened to blacks and Jews and gays and women and Hispanics in the United States? Or are we going to talk about right now what you can do to succeed? Because I don't think that the rules are holding you back. So I've never, ever, at any point suggested that there's not been historic discrimination against black people, or even that current-day poverty is at least in part an outgrowth of that historic discrimination. What I have suggested is that if you are using that historic discrimination as a reason why you are not, as an individual human being, becoming more income mobile and not making good decisions, no one is making the call for you right now as an individual to get that girl pregnant. And that's the argument that I'm making.
Can I say one thing?
Sure, yeah.
So I guess, would you, you have to admit, though, that between different races and different cultures, there are different levels of success, and there's definitely, you would expect that somebody who grows up with being able less to succeed, you would expect that would happen in certain communities and certain
right. That's why they're called
communities.
pathologies of culture. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you grew up in a worse situation than somebody else who grew up in a better situation, of course you're going to grow up having obstacles that other person has to overcome. But that doesn't mean that other person, number one, victimized you. Right? There's no one in America today, for example, who's enslaved a black person that I know of, or if they have, they'd be in jail. I'm sure that nobody in this room, right, none of the young white people in this room were alive during the times of Jim Crow. So the question is, do we take away from the white people in this room to rectify historic injustices, or do we recognize that history is filled with historic injustices, and now we're going to have to find a way to overcome those obstacles together without redistributing income, for example? Now, I have called for movements, for example, for companies to go into inner cities and make a deal with students in inner cities and say to them, listen, you get good grades and we'll pay for your college, and then you come afterward and you work for us for 3 years to pay off that debt. And I think there are things that we can do in the private sector. This is why I think religious communities are so important. I'm not against charity. I'm not against us as individuals going out and helping people. What I am against is the idea that the government can fix this problem, because the government cannot fix historic inequity. All the government can do is set the rules at an equal level, equal law, equal judgment under law, equal justice under law is the only way that we're ever going to approach anything that looks like a fair society. There's no such thing as a fair society where the government plays God and gives some to others and takes from others.
And so, would you say that we should, other people who are not, in an oppressed state, they should wait for other people to pull themselves up? Do you think that's how we should solve it, or do you think there is a moral
I think every culture in
responsibility?
American history, every individual in American history who has succeeded has had a combination of people who help them out, not in the government, people who help them out and their own capacity to bootstrap it. And when my great-grandparents got here, they were dirt poor and didn't speak English. Great-great-grandparents got here. They were dirt poor and didn't speak English. This is true for virtually everybody in the room, right? At some point, somebody came over here and they were dirt poor and didn't speak English. And that doesn't mean that on a generational level, people are going to go from 0 to 100. But it does mean that we're going to need to move in the right direction as opposed to sitting around and talking about historic injustice all day, because that doesn't get anything done. Thanks so much.